Hello, guys. Welcome back to our podcast, Literature Unpacked. I am Nomonde and I'm with my partner,
Owen Nomonde.
And today we are going to talk about The Bloody Chamber, written by Angela Carter in 1979. And this is one of the most powerful feminist Gothic fairy tales in the 20th centuries. Fairy tales are some of the most enduring cultural narrative, and they present marriage, wealth, and happily ever after as the reward for women who are obedient, beautiful, passive, and however, Angela Carter challenges the tradition by giving women power, agency, and curiosity and desire, and also giving them ways to outsmart and overcome men and patriarchy. In her collection, in a 1979 collection, The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories, Angela Carter rewrites familiar fairy tales like The Bluebeard and Beauty and the Beast, and she exclaims, can you remind me of the exclamation?
I think, you mean, my intention was not to do the versions,
yeah.
but to extract the latent content from the traditional stories and to use it as a beginning of the new stories.
Yes, thank you. And so that is why The Bloody Chamber is both familiar and unsettling, as we know that it begins like a fairy tale where a young 17-year-old girl marries an old wealthy man, and then they live in the castle near the sea, but then it's later changes into a Gothic nightmare about violence, sexuality, and survival.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. All this makes a Bloody Chamber a more powerful collection that engages with a co-critical debate, whether it primarily critiques the abusive men or dismantles the cultural fantasy of romance, wealth, and happy ever after years. In essence, Carter masterfully interweaves these two critiques, demonstrating how romantic illusions often lay the groundwork for predatory male behavior.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to our first key passage when the Marquis hands the keys to his young wife, the protagonist. He says, "All is yours. Every way is open to you, but except this one room." Yes. This echoes the Bluebeard fairy tale. But then Carter gives it a darker and more symbolic meaning. The keys represents knowledge, desire, and female curiosity, and then the stain that is on the key once she enters the chamber that does not wash off is like a Gothic mark of sin, but also of the truth.
Yeah, from a female perspective, the bride's obedience is crucial. Instead of being punished for curiosity, as in traditional tales, she discovers the Marquis' secrets. She says, the dozen husbands, the dozen of husbands impaled a dozen of brides. Here, Carter uses a brutal language and exposes how women's bodies became object of male power and desires.
Okay, now looking at the climax, when the mother comes and rescue her daughter, Carter writes that my mother had disposed of a man-eating tiger with her bare hands. The Marquis was defeated by my mother's revolver. So you remember when they first met, the protagonist described a Marquis as a beast person, as a lion or what. So I think this is revolutionary because instead of a prince saving a passive princess, Carter gives us a mother figure, and she comes there, she is armed, protective, and powerful. And I think this transforms the Gothic terror into a feminist rewriting agency. Yeah. So, in other words, Carter, I think, uses symbols like when she represents the Mara as a revolver that shatters the fantasy of romance, and then that rescue was not just about love. It was about survival and the solidarity between women. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. In this case, Carter also advocates for female agency. The protagonist's salvation doesn't come from a prince, but from her, a girl featured indomitable mother, who arrives like a miracle to shoot the markers. Similarly, other heroine move towards the self-determination. For instance, the girl in is it Elkin? The Elkin plans to strangle the capture and free the entrapped birds. While the protagonist of the Tiger's Bride actively embraces a transformation, liberated identity, shedding her woman skin to become a tiger-like creature. To continue, let's look at the Gothic and feminist styles, where the author Carter uses Gothic devices like isolated castle, the airy sea, and also the chamber of corpses to create dread and suspenses. She uses imagery rich with blood, darkness, and death, but she fuses this with the feminist critique, all this showing how marriage can be a trap, not a reward, if I may say.
Oh, and additionally, looking at her narrative perspective, Carter uses a first-person voice through the bride. We see both vulnerability and awakening in the bride or the protagonist. Carter uses figurative language that shifts from innocence to horror, as we see the protagonist says that the lilies I always associate with him. The lilies symbolize what? Innocence. And then looking again at Carter's use of symbolism, setting, and voice, they reveal the structure of male dominance.
Okay, but here is where the debate begins. Does the Bloody Chamber critique the Marquis as a toxic man, or does it critique the cultural fantasy of romance itself?
I'd say it critiques the Marquis as as a toxic man.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say because of like he's represented as a monster, his sadism, his world, and his control, and those are all his personal flaws.
Oh, okay, but I see it different now. The heroine falls into danger because she believes in the fairy tale promises of wealth and marriage. Remember, Carter suggests that the fantasy of wealth and happy ever after is itself corrupt.
I think otherwise. You know, the fairy tale fantasies, that's most elite men used to lure like vulnerable women and stuff, that promising them marriage and happily ever after and all those. So here in the text, we see the protagonist that she comes from a family that is not in privilege. So the Marquis use that, he takes that for advantage. He takes the protagonist actually for granted. He buys gifts, for example, the ruby choker and the jewels, all those things. So maybe the protagonist was blinded by those jewels, and I'd say that is still relevant even today. You know the story of P. Diddy, right? The famous rapper from America. Yes, he's been accused of like abusing women and sex trafficking them and all that. And then the perfect example.
Coming back to South Africa.
Yeah,
okay.
yes, Mampintsha, Mandla Maphumulo.
Okay.
Yeah, his late, Babe Zodumo's late husband. So in this case, we're gonna take Babe Sodumo and the protagonist, put them in the same page. They both come from what we can say poor families, and then marries to the Babe Sodumo. Mampintsha is famous, he's in privilege, and then also the Marquis he's wealthy, and so both the women are vulnerable.
Okay.
Yeah. So these men use like fantasies to lure them. The Marquis buys gifts for the protagonist, and then obvious Mampintsha introduced Babe Sodumo to the music industry and stuff. So yeah.
So maybe the contradiction is a point here. Kata shows us both, you can say, the monster of patriarchy embodied in one man, as you just mentioned, the Marquis, and the practical example of Babe Sodumo and the late Mampintsha. So, and the cultural myth that allows him to thrive.
Okay, we can also say that because culture rewrites fairy tales or reinvents them in an unsettling way. So yeah, this.
Okay, so to conclude, we can say both. I mean, the Bloody Chamber is both Gothic horror and the feminist reimagining.
And then culture transforms fairy tales into a story of entrapment, agency, and survival. And she does that using language, symbolism, figurative language, characterization, and perspective. And then, yeah.
That's all. So she critiques abusive men like
the Marquis,
but also the cultural fantasy of romance that blinds women into danger.
And in doing so, she reminds us that the myth we inherit can be deadly, but they can also be rewritten as she does.
Yeah. I think we came to the end of our podcast. Thank you, guys. See you next time.
Bye.